I think a principal difference between my opinion and the critics of the Warren Commission has to do with the single bullet theory. And as chairman of the Select Committee on Assassinations, I did look at every little piece of evidence, photographs, x-rays, clothing, cars, together with the other members of the panel, including Dr. Wecht. And I concluded, as did 8 of 9 members of the panel, that the single bullet theory is valid. It's not a theory, it's the way bullets behave. And that that's the disagreement with most of the Warren Commission critics. I have no idea. All I could say is there were 9 chief medical examiners from throughout the United States, 9 board-certified forensic pathologists who every day have to do autopsy, testify in court about how people die from gunshot wounds. We don't consult with military people. We don't consult with Zapruder films. We have a certain expertise that tells us, as with President Kennedy, where the entrance wound is, where the exit wound is, if there is a re-entrance wound, as happened with Governor Connolly. And that's the reason we do autopsies, because eyewitnesses, for example, can be flawed. With the Kennedy assassination, I think Governor Connolly, eyewitness, and Mrs. Connolly, an eyewitness, the scientific evidence shows are mistaken when they think that the first bullet struck the president, to which they reacted. And the scientific evidence shows it was the second bullet that struck the president and Governor Connolly. A forensic pathologist has to take into account, no autopsy is done in isolation or in a vacuum, all the surrounding evidence that's pertinent. We take into account eyewitness testimony, physician testimony, the testimony of people who've operated on the individual, and we do an autopsy, and we do other pertinent scientific investigations, and we take it all together and make a judgment. We utilize whatever information we need. In this situation, we reached out and we got forensic dentists to be involved. We got a forensic anthropologist to be involved. We did a lot of work with forensic photography. We went out and interviewed every doctor that had ever taken an x-ray of President Kennedy and to validate x-rays, for example. So we, as a panel, forensic pathology panel, did all the things we would do in any murder case, is we correlated the autopsy findings with every other piece of pertinent evidence, clothing, the car, that we could examine. And then we came up with our conclusion. It isn't just based on a hole in the body. My interpretation of the bullet found in the gurney is that how it was found, who found it, is open to argument. What isn't open to argument is that that bullet found in the gurney came from the Mannlicher Carcano rifle that Lee Harvey Oswald had purchased under an assumed name, and which was found in the area from where the gunshots came, in the 6th floor book depository. So that from my opinion, interpretation is that bullet came from the weapon that was fired by Lee Harvey Oswald. His fingerprints were in and around it. I think the bullet itself came out from Governor Connolly's left thigh, because when it finally entered the left thigh, going through President Kennedy, through his chest, wrist, and at the left thigh, it was a spent bullet. So it only went in partially. It broke the skin and was not fully into the thigh, and therefore in the course of movement came out at some point. Now, where it came out and how it was found, I don't know. But I think that that bullet was the one fired by Lee Harvey Oswald. A bullet normally that we see in civilian practice in Pittsburgh and New York City is usually a handgun bullet that's meant to deform when it strikes an object and not to go through the body, because then it could hit an innocent bystander. This was a military round. Military rounds, by Geneva Convention, are supposed to be full metal jacketed and not break apart in the body because of the pain and suffering it can cause. So, as found out with dum-dum bullets during World War I and other wars. So that by convention, this is meant to go through the body without much deformity. This is a very thick, jacketed bullet, this particular Italian military ammunition. It went through President Kennedy without striking any bone, so it was undeformed going through President Kennedy. When it struck Governor Connolly and struck a rib, slight deformity, struck the wrist, a much greater deformity. Now, the deformity itself was a flattening of the one side of the bullet. It was not a pristine bullet. When I held it, you couldn't roll it on a table. It was flat on one end. And I think that is accounted for by striking the radius bone near the wrist as it went through and into the thigh. So I think that the bullet itself went through in a straight line as it was supposed to and was slightly deformed just the way it was supposed to behave. And it's not magic, and it's just an ordinary military round. I feel that eyewitnesses and officers often make mistakes on weapons, on eyewitness identification, and the scientific fact is that the weapon that was found in the Texas Book Depository and was subsequently tested by the Dallas police and then the FBI was Oswald's weapon that he had purchased. And I think that to the extent that the first officer thought it was a different kind of weapon, I think was a mistake. My personal feeling about the conspiracy theory with the murder of John F. Kennedy derives from my youth listening to the Lone Ranger on radio. The Lone Ranger taught my generation that one good guy could beat up lots of bad guys. The converse is you need a lot of bad guys to beat up a good guy. And it's inconceivable to many people that one nobody, one nutty person, Oswald, could single-handedly kill a president of such great stature. And I think that fits into our concepts of conspiracy theories. There's got to be a lot of people involved to hurt a hero. My opinion is Oswald was the only shooter that struck the president. He fired 3 shots. 2 struck the president from behind, through Connolly, through the president. No other bullets struck the president. We can't tell from, as a forensic scientist, a forensic pathologist, if anybody put him up to it, if there was anybody otherwise who contributed to his doing this thing, but he was the only shooter that struck the president. Maybe there were other shooters in Dealey Plaza, but I find that hard to believe because none struck the president or anybody else in Dealey Plaza, which was very crowded. And the only evidence of a weapon discharge, 3 cartridges, the 2 bullets found, were from Oswald's weapon.